Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Ink to Paper, Stories and Interviews. I am your host, H.A. Spector. I hope you all enjoyed our last guest, the founders and creators of Snoozine magazine, and our discussion on starting an online speculative fiction magazine. This week, we are diving into the topic of creative nonfiction and how writing compelling marketing copy can and does exercise that creative muscle. This is a great episode for anyone out there who might be looking for another revenue stream that capitalizes on their writing skills, as freelancing is still a strong industry. And while it can feel crowded, our guest today has the experience to give us tips on how to make your marketing copy compelling so you can build an awesome portfolio. So, with all that said, let's jump straight in. Today's guest is a fellow student in the MFA program at SNHU and has recently had a short story accepted for publication in an anthology. She is a copywriter by day and a fiction writer by night. And it's an extra special interview for me because I'm honored to personally call her a friend and critique partner. Please join me in welcoming to the show, Amie Glazier. Hello, Amie. How are you?
I am doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to be on. Really appreciate it. Stoked for today's interview. Excited to hear what you have to say. But let's go ahead and jump straight into our icebreaker questions. So when did you first know you wanted to be a writer?
Well, it wasn't ever something that I had the realization of, wow, I want to be a writer. But I just always had this natural tendency towards words and towards stories. And I think the first story I ever wrote was kind of outlined the horrors of making friends when you're a 10-year-old ghost who haunts a lonely and isolated museum. And it was penned in an equally horrific 10-year-old chicken scratch. Surprise, surprise. But my parents loved it. And I was like, well, yeah, of course you do, right? It's an amazing story. And when I was cleaning out my childhood room before my parents moved away a couple years ago into the house they're in now, I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, but also super cute, Amy. Good job. Right? And they were just really good in helping me to really harness that creative energy and putting it into words, and that imagination. Even when
Yeah.
I got too old to have an imaginary friend, my dad said it was no longer socially acceptable to promote that out in the world. But he said, but you can do that in your room and in your own journal. Okay. And I said, okay, that's fantastic. So there was never a moment where I was like, I want to be a writer until I got older, right? Until I got older
Yeah.
and realized, hey, this is something I'm good at. This is something I enjoy. But it was always that
Mhm.
pipe dream of, well, some people are meant to do that when they have the opportunity, but I don't have those opportunities. I have to live in the real world, right? And
Yeah,
that was kind of always a separation of, well, my imagination is over here, but the real world is over here. And this is kind of where I have to mold myself to fit into. And so it's always that pipe dream that I think we can all relate to of,
for
well,
sure.
this is not reality, but wouldn't it be nice if I became a writer, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally can relate to that. I feel like, as you grow up, you're like, I guess I have to be an adult and I have to do adult things. And you don't think that like, well, writing is as a valid profession, it just feels like one of those things. It's like a dream. And so for some of us, it's really hard to chase our dreams, right?
Yeah, it totally is.
But I do have a follow-up question on that because this is wonderful. Two things. First off, since you found the copy, I feel like we are owed a rewrite.
Oh, okay.
A rewrite. Well, actually, hold on. First off, I think we need the original, and then maybe you should submit that for publication. Maybe it's your foray into middle grade.
I mean, I do have kids who read middle grade fiction. And so, my oldest son is really big into writing and he's also big into F1 racing. So he likes a lot of passions and hobbies. But he has a file on our family computer that says, this is mine, no one can open it. That's literally what the file is called. To where he writes his own stories. And I love
I
that.
love
And so
that.
sometimes we'll sit down and he's like, Mom, I have a good idea for a story. I was like, awesome, do it, write it, let's do it.
Yeah,
And so like I've thought about it for a while. I need to read more middle grade fiction with him, let's be honest. I read books that I really like, but maybe I'll read more middle grade fiction and actually write it too. With him, you never know.
yeah, that'd be great. That would be awesome. Can you imagine having a book out there that's like co-authored by your son, and you have this like, that'd be a special thing.
I would love to do that. And I told him too. I said, "Hey, let me figure out how publishing works first with my own books, and then we'll tackle that together, dude."
I love that. Okay, then what inspired you to seek your MFA degree?
Yeah. Another person, right? Like I had a catalyst because I lived so much of my life realizing that this dream of becoming a writer is for other people. It's not for me because I have to be in the real world doing real world things.
Yeah.
But a couple years ago, I worked at a company in the HR department where my boss left and I was the sole recruiter of the company. And so I had the unique position of hiring my own boss, which was really weird, first of all, but kind of a fun, thing. So they had to hire an HR consultant in the interim to kind of, HR is a big thing where you don't want to have people who don't really have the HR experience to be managing the HR functions of a company. So they hired in a consultant who is a fantastic human. I still have her phone number. I still text her because she's just a wonderful human, a great leader, and a fantastic life coach, really. And so she was sitting down with me like she did with the rest of the team and helping prepare us of, okay, here's some things you want to think about in order to present yourself and your career and your dreams to your new boss who's going to be coming in. She wanted us
Yeah.
to be very competent in that. So she asked me point blank, she said, "Amie, if money and opportunity were of no consequence, what would you do with your life that serves your passions?" And without missing a beat, I was like, well, obviously, I'd be a motivational speaker and write novels, but that has no relation to my job in HR. But she, like, I will never forget her face because she looked at me with just sincere, I don't even know. She was just very sincere in her response and said, "Well, what's stopping you?" And I
Mm,
got defensive. I was like, "Well, I don't know. I don't know what's stopping me. Sure. Okay, whatever." But her words really stuck with me, and I started taking a really
yeah.
good inventory of my life and what I'm doing and what does serve my passions, because so much of my life has been spent married to a military guy and putting everything I want to do aside to serve his career and to serve my four children. And I've
Yeah.
sidelined a lot of myself in the process, which I feel like a lot of military spouses or more or less stay-at-home moms get to this point when you reach 40 and you're like, what have I done with my life? Right?
Yeah.
But I started to ask myself, well, why am I not being a motivational speaker? And why am I not writing novels? Because life is short. And so I started doing the research and realized, okay, I need a lot more education. I need a lot more training in order to give these ideas justice on paper. So I did a lot of research and figured out that the SNHU program was the best with what it offered business wise of needing all those business skills, as well as
Yeah.
genre focus, as well as I could just do it in my spare time, which granted I don't even have a lot of, right? But I could
Yeah.
do it on in the evenings after my kids go to bed and on the weekends and things like that. And so that's what brought me to the program. I had a catalyst named Sue who said, "Pursue your dreams," because she didn't look at me like everyone else did of like, "Oh, you want to be a princess when you grow up, honey girl, that's so cute." Right? When I said that I want to be a writer, she took my dreams seriously, and that was the
Yeah.
catalyst for me to take my own dreams seriously. And so I sincerely hope that anyone out there listening has their own catalyst, whether they're named Sue or not, that they have that catalyst in their life. And if not, then maybe I'll be your motivational speaker, right? Because that's the second aspect to my dream.
I love that. Shout out to Sue. Great job, Sue.
Huge shout out to Sue because she's just an amazing human.
Absolutely. Sounds like it. And I'm so happy that she was there to push you in. Selfishly, because then we got to meet and I got to become your friend, and that's been
I
great. And
know.
we've become great critique partners, and it's been a blast. But also just cool to see you be able to like take a step into or a step towards your dreams and your passions. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering my icebreaker questions. Let's go ahead and jump into today's interview. So today's discussion is centered around marketing and writing compelling, creative, nonfiction marketing copy. So my first question to you, Amie, is how did you find this line of work? Because previously you said you were doing HR. And was it something you always wanted to do, or did it kind of sort of find you?
Okay, well, the easiest way to explain my career trajectory is imagine with me a cartoon tennis match, right? So if you imagine like the wild Looney Tunes characters are having a tennis match, the ball bounces back and forth for a couple
Yeah.
turns, and then it bounces across, the seats in the audience. And then it bounces out to space and hits an alien in the forehead on Mars, and then it comes back bouncing off the Eiffel Tower and then back into the stadium where it probably pegs the opponent in their balls, right? Like that's been my career trajectory. And this is because, after I graduated with my bachelor's in English, and then, like I said, I married a military guy, and we moved 7 times in his 10 years of active duty military service.
Oof, man.
And so any military spouse will get on this giant soapbox with me to say it is impossible for military spouses to truly have a career.
Yeah.
So with every duty station that we lived in, I had kind of a different professional life. And let's see, I was a personal trainer, I was a professional singer, I owned my own business, I was a blogger, I managed a gym, I was a marketing copywriter, I was a career matchmaker, I was a chaos manager, aka stay-at-home mom. So I've done a lot of different things, but
Yeah.
kind of when you get out, step 10 feet back from my resume and really look at, okay, like what are the common threads between all these different jobs and careers and companies and line of work?
Hmm.
They've all just at their core have compelling writing, right? So like I'm a really good communicator. That's how I was trained in school. That's what I've kind of developed in myself.
Yeah.
And they kind of all have that compelling call to action, if you will,
Yeah.
of being able to communicate that well.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's interesting, right? Because basically, getting into marketing wasn't like a freelance thing. Like you got a job as someone writing copy for a company, right? That's your most recent, your most recent career move.
More or less. And it was because I had an HR manager who took a chance on me, who I said, hey, I'm a really good writer. I know how to market things well. It doesn't show in my resume because, my resume is a tennis ball hitting an alien in the forehead on Mars, right?
Yeah.
But she was a military spouse and was able to kind of see through the lines of like, yeah, I think you'd be really good at this job, and
Yeah.
probably convinced the marketing director to hire me because he probably didn't want to because he looks at resumes, right?
Yeah.
So she just took a chance on me and I did fantastic. I did a great job in that company, so much that they're like, hey, we need someone with your skills to be a recruiter. So I then transferred from the marketing department of that company to the HR department of that company, but still did, you know, marketing copywriting because I was writing job descriptions where the call to action was, hey, apply, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
like, everything, I mean, I firmly believe that everything that is written has that inherent call to action, which basically is words that make you do something,
Yeah.
right?
Right. But that's really cool. I think, it's you having so many different types of jobs and so many different, like you dabbled in a lot of different fields and career moves. I think that alone, right, is proof that you could be, especially if you have the writing chops to back it up, you could be a great like copywriter because you
Hmm.
have experience in all these different like occupations and fields. And so, this is what it takes to like market a gym and this is what it takes to market a, HR or, whatever. And so you can kind of place all of that, all those, you can use all of that experience in your copywriting.
Yeah.
So, okay, for those who don't know what marketing copy is, right? Because might be self-explanatory to some, maybe some don't understand that term fully. So, can you give us an introduction to it and why it's important?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to it in my last answer, but at its core, marketing copywriting is basically writing words that make somebody do something. And
Yeah,
that's called a call to action or a CTA. And if your call to action is compelling, then the person who's reading your words will actually do the thing that you want them to do. So, I mean, if you go to Google, type in, literally search for anything you want to search, and then the results will populate, and that's marketing copy, right? So,
yeah,
you have the headline of whatever page has your answer to your search. And then you have the meta description underneath that, which is the marketing copy of why you want to click on that link.
Yeah.
And if their copy is compelling, then you're going to click on that link before you click on all of the other ones.
Yeah.
Right. But marketing is also, I mean, let's say you go to an event and somebody hands you their business card, and the call to action is you're going to call them, you're going to email them, you're going to visit your website, you're going to follow
Right.
up in some sort of capacity. And if they communicated their value to you effectively, which is value proposition, when they handed you their card, then you'll follow through with actually contacting them.
Yeah.
But I believe that fiction writing also has a call to action, right? Because the
Yeah.
CTA is you want the reader so engrossed in your story, in your characters, that they don't want to leave the world you've created. So if your call to
Right.
action is compelling, they're not going to put your book down.
Right.
I mean, even the sticky notes that litter my desk have a call to action of, hey, dummy, don't forget this, right? And there's a lot more in depth strategy and psychology that comes into play with an effective value proposition and your target audience and exactly how you craft that call to action.
Yeah.
But essentially, boiled down to its core, marketing copy is words that make somebody want to do something.
That makes sense. And I think too, along with that, I think this might be a great reason for all you out there listening that are just fiction writing and you never, forayed into creative nonfiction in the marketing world or otherwise. Like, this is why it's important, right? Is because if you're one of the thousands of writers out there who already have or are planning to launch your own website, you know, you are going to have to learn the secrets of creative nonfiction marketing copy, because that is a call to action. You want people to come to your website. You want people then, when they're on their website,
Yeah.
to then click the newsletter sign up button, and you want them to buy your book if you have book links, and you want them to read your short stories if you have short stories, or check out podcasts or whatever else you're doing to build your author platform. And so even if you don't plan on ever jumping into copywriting as a career, it's important to learn these elements so that you can apply them to your fiction writing and your author platform.
Yeah. And I mean, it really just comes down to psychology, right? Of how to craft a compelling call to action that makes the other person want to follow through. I mean, even with parenthood, when I'm thinking about, okay, I need my kid to clean their room, I have to craft a really damn compelling call to action to make them actually clean their room. And I have
Yeah.
to have a really good value proposition on it. And so
Yeah.
it's just psychology. So, as an author, you need to really figure out, right, who your target audience is. What are those genre expectations? What are those target reader personas that you're trying to communicate to? And how do you communicate the value of your book to them and why they will like it? And that is the exact same thing I mean, it translates so well. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit different of how you communicate that value, but it
Right.
translates really well into marketing in literally any other industry. And so I truly believe that fiction writers make really, really excellent marketing copywriters in literally any other sphere of the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why, like, when, me and you both being SNHU students and MFA, and we take a lot of business classes as part of that master's degree program, that is why I think that they push us to explore those avenues, right? And being like, hey, if you want to make money as a writer, you may find it hard to do that right away as a fiction writer, writing only stories, making money solely off your published stories and
Yeah.
whatnot. That might be something you can get to eventually at some point. Very few make it right away, but here's another way to kind of subsidize and earn revenue, and that's by, you know, jumping into the world of either freelancing or finding a position like you did, Amie. You find somebody who's willing to take a chance on you to say, hey, I know that you're a fiction writer, and you have all this experience. Let's put that into action and try you out as a copywriter. And so, which can be a great and fulfilling career as well.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I think that actually, and so that kind of segues into the next question, which is, a lot of fiction writers out there might not be putting two and two together, and they might be like, well, that has nothing to do, like, it's nonfiction, it has nothing to do with fiction, even though you kind of touched base on how it links together. But let's talk about the fulfillment of that, right? So when you're at your 9 to 5, right? Well, and I know for you, Amie, sometimes it's not 9 to 5, but
It's not 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Sure.
right, exactly. But when you're at your day job, what in what ways do you find your creative muscles being exercised when you're writing marketing copy, and how can that like translate and fulfill and make you a better fiction writer?
Yeah. The best way to describe this, especially to writers, is thinking about how do you get really deep into your POV, right? So you're thinking about your protagonist and you're thinking about their backstory and you're writing, your character outlines and their archetype and their fulfillment of their character arc, and you're thinking about all these different things.
Mhm.
You're asking yourself questions of, okay, what did they want to do when they were a kid, and where do they shop for groceries, do they like to eat out, all these different things. And this is the exact
Yeah.
same questions I need to ask myself when I am crafting my targeted personas for marketing. So like right now, I'm working for a nonprofit that does leadership development programs, and so I've crafted a couple different personas that I target my message to, which are kind of like POVs, if you will. So if you're thinking about, all of my messaging in the form of a novel, I have three different POVs that I'm going back and forth between with all of my marketing copy. So the
Yeah.
first one is someone who is a peer leader who has dreams of having more influence in their community or in their career. The second one is somebody who's a manager who just really wants to lead their team better. And the
Mm.
third is a company leader who wants to really invest in their people and create some career trajectory within their company. So, with each of these personas, I essentially get to do a character worksheet and try and figure out, okay, where do they live? Do they have kids? How many kids do they have? How old are their kids? Where do they shop for their groceries? Do they eat out? Where do they go on vacation? If
Yeah.
overtime is required, would they rather work early, work late, or work weekends? What is their dream job? If they had $1,000 extra to spend, how would they spend it? And just like in creating character backstory, these are probably things that will never be expressed within my marketing copy. But in order for my message to be compelling, I have to know exactly who I am talking to. So I need to know what they care about, what their obstacles are. And within my copy, it's going to be compelling if I create the value proposition of why they need to care about me and my message, and how
Yeah.
my service, my product, my whatever is going to overcome the obstacles that they are facing in their life, in their work, in their whatever, and will help them move on to the next step that they want to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, that's a clear, to me, it's a clear one-to-one like comparison, right? Because that is, and again, so I'll say this: if you're a fiction writer who is not currently doing character sketches or character arc worksheets to get deeper into the mind of your character, this can be a solid tip for improving the depth of your POV, as Amie was saying. But that is really cool in that, you kind of get to exercise that function as a copywriter to then, and then how it translates over. Well, if I can get really good at writing good copy for this target audience or this persona, then I can also dive deeper into my persona for my fiction writing and get to know them better. And therefore, the words they use, my exposition, my dialogue will be more on brand for that character, which just makes them feel more authentic.
Yeah. And that is marketing, right? Because when you're doing all this character back work, your call to action is, hey, reader, believe this, right? This is a believable person. So I truly will get on the soapbox and say that any form of the written word in and of itself is a call to action in some
Yeah.
capacity. And again, that's why this just translates so well. And especially because I'm motivated by my creativity and my imagination, this is also kind of the mindset that I have to put myself in. So I stay really engaged in my own job and in the work that I do, because this is just what makes it fun, is the challenge and creating these backstories, and then creating this compelling copy, which
Yeah.
also, I mean, it goes so much deeper than this, right? But this is just scratching at the surface level for your target audience, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely. That's really cool. I think, the more I'm learning from you as you're talking about your experience and how they kind of, relate, and it makes me, because at one point, during the program, I think, I don't know if we all have this as SNHU students in the MFA program, but at one point I was like, oh yeah, I need to go out and make a profile on Fiverr or Upwork. And I'm like, I'm going to become a freelancer because yeah, absolutely. This makes sense. I'm going to definitely just go write copy for people. And so, but then, then it immediately dies out. Cause then I'm like, oh, I don't know. I can't do this. Right. And I've never written copy for anyone, which is not true. As you're saying, like I have every time I write a social media post, every time I write,
Hmm.
if I put something on my website, every time I put words on the paper, I am effectively giving that call to action, like you said. So I'm lying to myself when I say I don't have any experience copywriting. But for those out there who are like, oh, that's that, Amie, that's really interesting. I want to check that out. I want to see if I could stretch that creative muscle and potentially, expand my revenue stream or, dabble in copywriting as a profession, either as a career or just on the side. What are some of your like tips for getting started? From HR perspective, like,
Hmm.
what you look for in people that you hire. So from a career perspective, or even just from a freelancing perspective, what are some tips for building a portfolio and, or maybe getting that shot at copywriting?
Yeah. I mean, I always recommend LinkedIn Learning. I mean, if you want to learn anything in this life, even playing the guitar, LinkedIn Learning has courses for that, but even more on the professional scheme. They just have such a wealth of information and have done a really, really good job of curating high achieving professionals in every single industry to talk about literally anything under the sun. And that's always kind of my first go-to and recommendation. And even if you don't have LinkedIn Learning, I think we might get it as SNHU students potentially. When I checked in for my next class, I was like, oh, we get a LinkedIn Learning. So I don't know if it's just for this class or if it's for always. I don't know. Fact check me, please. But you can even just sign up for a free trial and just binge learn for a couple weeks, just to
Mm,
kind of get a good
yeah,
base of getting started. And then some creative exercises, whether you want to get into copywriting or not, is open a magazine or watch live TV, which honestly, we just stream everything with no commercials, but
it's
find
true.
something that has a commercial and an advertisement and just look at one that doesn't resonate with you, that you're like, ew, I would never buy that or purchase that or go there
Yeah,
or whatever. So, and then figure out, well, why? What about it didn't resonate? What about the messaging? What about the person who was saying the messaging? And who is the target audience? Because if it didn't resonate with you, it's probably not you. And
yeah,
so figure out what was the target audience of that message, and then how would you rewrite the message to target you?
yeah,
And that's kind of a fun exercise. And then I also like finding an ad that is targeted to me. Anyone else have a wallet that's personally victimized by late night Instagram ads? Just me? Okay. So I like taking those ads that, I mean, let's be real. It's like all these book talk people that are like, so Amie, this is what you need. And at 10 p.m., I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so right. Um, right. And so I find something that resonates with me in that way. And then I try and change the message to target someone different, which for me is my husband, because he cares about different things, processes the world in a different way. And I'm like, how would I take this book talk ad and target my husband, which is a really intriguing concept because he does not like reading books. But and so those are just some good ways to just take the
yeah,
world around you and just try and, you know, use this creative muscles and use these skills that translate whether you want to do copywriting or you just want to be a better writer. Doing some of these exercises can be really fun. And it may be my personal mission to make my husband read all of these romantasy books with me. I don't know if I'll achieve it, but that is all. When I'm talking about my dreams, right? It's being a writer, being a motivational speaker. And I guess if I had to add a third, it's making him read these romance novels with me. Maybe
I
one
love
day.
that. Maybe one day. That's too good. Well, keep me updated how that goes. I'm rooting for you to fulfill all your goals.
Oh,
So,
thanks.
no, I mean, I think that's really good advice. I think, you know, especially like thinking of it that way, right? Like you were saying, finding an ad, if it targets you, great. If it doesn't target you, okay. But like if it doesn't target you, trying to find that target. And if it does target you, how to rewrite that. I think those are all very good creative exercises on how to, kind of work out that creative nonfiction muscle? And then what about on the resume front, from an HR
Mm.
perspective, through that lens, since you were HR, is, what are some ways that we can use our fiction writing experience, if that's all we have, to compel someone reading a resume to be like, oh, they could actually be a good writer? Like, is it just the words that we use on our resume themselves, which I'm sure is one way, but also, what are some things that, you can utilize and put into like skills or put into like career experience or, et cetera?
Yes, I could go so deep. We could have an entire podcast about how to write a compelling resume on its own. But the first thing I'll say is please don't fictionalize your resume, even as a fiction writer. Don't put fiction in there.
Oh
I
man.
have had that happen before, and it was, oh my gosh, the things I have seen. But I mean, it really all comes down to psychology. And so a lot of marketing classes or LinkedIn learning or podcasts or whatever you're going to find, they talk a lot about the psychology, right? Because getting someone to do something they didn't previously want to do is about utilizing psychology against them, which sounds terrible, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so in crafting a good resume, you got to figure out, well, what does this company care about? And if you can do the research, my gosh, please do the research. Figure out who is going to actually read my resume at this
Yeah.
company. Figure out who is their recruiter. And oftentimes, especially larger companies, are going to have multiple recruiters that work with multiple sections of the company. And so try
Right.
and figure out who is going to be that recruiter that reads, I don't know, all the sales resumes that come through, and figure out, do a deep dive on them. What do they care about, right? It's doing that backstory work. Maybe don't stalk them. Please don't stalk them and actually figure out where they buy their groceries or where their kids go to school, because that's kind of next level creepy. But just try and figure out, like, go to their LinkedIn and figure out what are the things that they post, what are the things that they like, and that's going to tell you what they value and what they naturally and organically engage in. And then use that to craft your value proposition, because your call to action with your resume is, for lack of better words, selling yourself to the company, of saying,
Yeah.
this is why I am the best fit for this job. And a lot of that is developing those personal relationships, because so much of resumes and hiring these days is done through AI, and in your resume is put through a program that evaluates, are you a good fit or are you not a good fit? So
Yeah.
anytime you can make those personal connections, it will go it it can take you the rest of the way, right? And this is just such a challenging job market, and I could seriously talk about this for a very long time. I have a lot of soapboxes, Heath. You've probably noticed. This is one of them. But I mean, my best advice is just curate those personal relationships in a very organic way. Again, not a creepy way, but
Yeah.
to go the extra mile in creating your value proposition, of using that psychology of, you know, depending on what the job is and how well your skills translate on paper, also translates to how you would write your resume. Because if they don't translate on paper, then you got to get real creative and look at all
Yeah.
these creative writing skills you're using.
Absolutely. I have been very creative on resumes before.
But not fictionalized,
And
right?
definitely not fictionalized at
Okay,
all,
that's good.
Amie. I would
No,
never do that.
no, wink, wink, nod, nod. Of course not.
So what you're saying is, don't put on the cover letter, "Dear AI algorithm." Just don't do that, even though you know that that's
Oh
who's
my
going to see
God.
it first.
Again, we could have our own podcast of don't do this. Yeah, don't do
I
that,
love that.
please.
I love that. Thank you so much for that advice. I think that it's very helpful, and I think that, for all of you out there listening, I hope that you have left with some tips on how you can get started, or how you can explore, or how you can chase down some potential creative nonfiction opportunities. And as we wind down, I do want to flip the script, if you will. And I'm looking at a script right now, so it's a pun. And thank you. But let's flip the script, and I want to talk a little bit about your creative fiction, because you've had some exciting personal developments in your creative fiction as of late. I am so excited for you, and I love that you are chasing your dream, and I love watching your dreams come true, right? And so, as I said in my introduction, like you just had a short story accepted for publication. So give us a little bit of that, like give us a little bit of a recap of that journey, right? Like submitting, all the way from submitting the story, where you found it, where you found the submission, what made you choose the story to submit, and then like a little peek behind the door, right? So many writers are like chasing that first publication opportunity. So what does it look like after you've been accepted for publication, from the time it's accepted to the time it actually gets put out into the world?
That's a great question. I'm still figuring that out myself because it's not out in the world. And I don't know how much I can say publicly in this
Yeah.
point in the process, but it's essentially a dark fairy tale anthology. And I heard about it through one of the university's Wireside chats because one of the professors is part of the founding board of this publisher, I'm
Oh,
pretty
okay.
sure, if I remember. But basically, the submission call was to reimagine the dark consequences of popular fairy tales after the happily ever after. And this is my favorite genre in the world, dark fairy tales. And
Yes.
so the story I submitted, let's see how I can say this, is basically an idea that I had a while back about what if the ending of The Little Mermaid, right? They sail through the rainbow after
Mm-hmm.
Ursula is stabbed through with a giant ship, basically. And so,
Yeah.
what if that became the origin story for, the legend of the sirens?
Oh,
And kind of the villainous side of sirens, if you know any of that legend and mythology.
yeah.
And if that sounds at all intriguing for you, I guess you'll just have to read the anthology when it comes out sometime this summer or fall.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that if you go out and at the end of the show, Amie will be giving her social media handles, and you should go out and immediately follow her so that you can stay up to date for when that anthology drops, and go out and get yourself a copy of it. But that's really cool. I had the privilege of reading, I think, an early draft of this story,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved it. It was so good. Amie is an excellent writer. And so I know that you will all enjoy it when it comes out. So what can you say about like what you've experienced so far since publication? Like, has it been what you've expected so far? Has it been nothing like you've expected so far in the terms of like editing rounds or things like that you've had to do?
Well, if it hasn't already been communicated, my imagination goes wild. So it's fair to say everything that happens in life is usually nothing like I expect. um, but so far, it's been pretty simple and easy and straightforward. And my story was flash fiction, which is 1,000 words.
Yeah.
So the first step after announcing that they accepted my piece was I had to sign, all the legal stuff that gives permission to print my story. And then a couple weeks after that, I got an email from the editor with proposed changes, which, I mean, I was super flattered because it was basically moving around commas and reordering words and sentences. It was pretty
That's
basic.
amazing.
And in my head, I'm like, yes, I accept all changes. You could have said that you wanted to flip the story on its head and change everything and be like, you want to publish me? I accept all changes. And that's been it so far. It's been pretty crickets, so it's pretty easy to forget. I'm like, oh yeah, this is getting published. So I'm sure as they work through the editing process, which I can't even imagine how much work this is to
Yeah.
compile all of this into publishing.
Right.
I'm sure there'll be a lot more information that comes out as it gets closer, and I have no idea when that will even be. I just have a general guesstimate of sometime this summer or fall, and that's been about it. So I don't know exactly what else to say, except
Yeah.
it's been very hands off. I'm just like, yes, please, I'll do anything you want. You're publishing my work. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. And I feel like most writers can relate, right? Like if we get that first publishing opportunity, you're like, I will do anything to just see my work in print. And that validation, right? We're all chasing that validation
Yeah.
as writers.
Yeah.
And so it's so cool to see that come alive. And you can bet, Amie, that I will be first in line when that comes out. I'll be buying a copy of that anthology, just so that I can highlight your story and be like, I knew her before she made it huge.
Because, of course, publishing 1,000 words in a small
Yeah,
print anthology is making
absolutely.
it huge.
It is. Yeah. Well, for me, it is. So, ultimate life goal. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Amie. Before we say goodbye, though, I want to wrap it up with a little segment I like to call, Hey, Amie, what you reading?
Well, I'm currently reading Metal Slinger by Rachel Snyder. And I can't tell you anything about it because I started it last night and maybe read 5 pages before I fell asleep.
Okay.
But I've heard from so many that it is amazing. And so I'm reading it. Also, because my sister in law keeps sending me 50,000 Instagram reels about why this book is amazing. And I was like, I get the idea, Melissa. I'm reading the damn book. Um, so touch base with me and give me a couple more days to read it, and I'll let you know. As far as my TBR, well, the easiest way to describe it is that it's less of a pile and more of a mosh pit at a death metal concert. Um, because all my books look like they're having so much fun and probably are stoned out of their mind. And I just really want to hang out with each one of them. And I just can't decide which one looks to be more fun. So it's usually the one that's jumping the highest and screaming the loudest that usually gets my attention next. Thus, Metal Slinger has gotten my attention because it's been screaming at the top of its lungs all over my Bookstagram. So that's why I'm reading that one. So as far as what's next, I don't know. We'll just see.
I love that. I love and that's kind of, to be honest with you, that's kind of how my TBR is, where it's just like a sea of books. And I'm like, I don't
Yes.
know. And usually what does it for me is I just go on Libby and I'm like, what's available? Oh, this one's available. I don't have to wait 8 weeks for this copy. Great. I will read this book. And so I definitely relate. But if you are, but on the topic, real quick, just before we go, on the topic of metal concerts, if you're, Amie, if you like the idea of metal concerts, I got a book recommendation for you.
Okay.
It's called We Sold Our Souls.
I love it already.
It is a horror metal band novel.
Oh, Heath, you are trying to get me to read so much horror, and one day I will when it screams the loudest and jumps the highest, I have to say.
Well, this is a metal band, so maybe it will scream the loudest. And I can't really talk about jumping. Jumping, it feels like a very niche skill that, only so many people have. Probably. I can only jump like an inch off the ground. So, maybe in your experiences, he'll jump the highest. I don't know. But screaming the loudest, definitely.
And it will be the most organic scream if it already knows what a death metal concert is. Because I have to admit, I've never been in a mosh pit at a death metal concert. But what I imagine in my over-imaginative brain is that's what my TBR would be like.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come talk to me, Amie. I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy that I got to pester you with questions and hear about, hear your soapbox answers, as well as your prepared answers, as well as your whatever came to your brain answers. Love it all. And so thank you so much for being here. Before we leave, where can listeners find you if they want to connect and follow you?
Yeah, the best way to connect and follow me is on Instagram at Amie Glazier. But my name is spelled a little differently, and I know it'll be in the show notes, but it's AMIEGLAZ as in zebra, IER. And if you wonder why would you spell your name like that, I don't know. Ask my parents.
We'll definitely we'll put their response in the show notes.
Perfect. I'll be in touch with them.
All right, sounds good. Again, thank you so much, Amie. It's been a pleasure having you on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Ink to Paper Stories and Interviews. If you enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to leave us a rating and a review on whatever podcast platform you use to access the episode. It's the best way to help the show grow and reach a wider audience. If you are a writer, author, or storyteller across any medium and you want to appear on a future episode of the show, please send me an email at h.a.spectorwrites@gmail.com or send me a message on Blue Sky at haspectorwrites.bsky.social. As always, keep promoting your local libraries, support your local community bookstores by buying books, including banned ones, and keep on supporting the storytellers you know and love. All of these things help support a healthy and thriving literary landscape, whether you are a writer or a reader. And I will catch you all in the next chapter.